All right, class, it's Mr. Bliss. This is my second shot at recording this video because the first one had no sound, so great. But anyway, we're back. I hope you had a nice weekend. And we finished off with this guy and his cool hat, right, at this battle. So let's move on. We talked about the continental system and the peninsular war. Now we're gonna go on to big mistake number 3, probably the biggest one for Napoleon. And this is, of course, his invasion of Russia. If you ever want to become a conquering dictator, don't invade Russia in the winter. Well, actually, you probably can now because there's planes and stuff. But anyway, back then, don't do it. The Mongols successfully did it, but as we know with the Mongols, they did things that like no other army ever could do. They were very unique, singularly unique. This destroys Napoleon's forces. We're going to look at the numbers, and it just completely wipes out his forces. Hitler does the same thing 120 years later. And you know what? I'm glad Hitler did that because it destroyed the Nazi army too. You'd think you'd learn from history, but thankfully Hitler didn't, and this was a big downfall of the Nazi Germany. Is him repeating the same mistake as Napoleon. So, again, pay attention in history class. Okay, Russian point of view. The Russians at this time, they were the heirs of the Byzantine Empire. So they were related by their ancestors were the Byzantine emperors. And remember, the Byzantines, they were in charge of Constantinople until the Ottoman Empire took them out, right? Tsar, sometimes spelled like this. Russian has a different alphabet, so sometimes you'll see different transliterations. This comes from the Latin word Caesar. It's just how they would say it in Russian. So it's an absolute monarch. Remember, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar were the two first emperors of Rome. The Slavic peoples, I think we've talked about different ethnicities, where in Eastern Europe, most of the people are of Slavic ethnicity. This includes, the former Byzantines, and then a lot of Eastern European countries. They had traditionally been always fighting against the Germanic ethnicity, which is like the Habsburgs, the Germans, the Austrians. Again, going forward to Hitler, he thinks the Germanic people are the superior race. So even though he's not born in Germany, he was born in Austria, he was of Germanic ethnicity. But we're getting ahead of ourselves there. So anyway, Russia had been friends of France because France had technically been pretty much always at war with the Germanic peoples, right? Germany as a country does not exist yet, but we're talking about ethnicities here. Okay, I hope that makes some kind of sense. Okay, Russia's massive. Again, Tsar Alexander I is in charge. He's the one that was defeated by Napoleon at Austerlitz. He was technically an ally, but remember, with the whole continental system, a lot of these allies didn't follow Napoleon's rules. So he did not stop trading with the British, like Napoleon had pretty much forced the countries to do. He just ignored it. Napoleon gets angry, eventually, gets 420,000 soldiers, so almost 500,000, from 20 different nations. This is the Grand Army that marches into Russia. Excuse me, I need a glass of water because I've been talking for so long. Okay, let's complete this before I lose my voice. Again, Napoleon was an excellent field commander, so on a battlefield, you don't want to go up against him. You're probably going to lose. But he was also, personality, pretty impulsive and made risky decisions. So he leaves for Russia in August. Now, that's 3,000 miles away. What month do you think it's going to be when he gets there? What's the weather going to be like? Yeah, it's going to be winter. It's going to be freezing. So, not smart. Okay, yeah, he makes it by September, but the way back, we'll talk about that. And Russia is retreating the entire time. We'll talk about what this means right now. Scorched earth policy. So if you remember about the Peninsular War, when Napoleon's armies were going through Spain to attack Portugal, how did they get a lot of their food? they would just go to some farm and eat the crops, kill the animals, eat the meat. And again, this was one reason why many Spanish rebelled in guerrilla warfare. What the Russians are going to do instead is, as the Grand Army of Napoleon comes closer and closer, the Russians, the people, and the military are going to retreat and destroy everything that they have. So here we see cities on fire in this picture. But yeah, if you burn down your farm and kill all your animals, Napoleon's army is not eating. And they probably don't have a place to stay either. And it's cold outside. And they're they don't have their winter gear with them. So again, this is called scorched earth policy. You should remember this term. So September, Napoleon has a victory, loses 30,000 of his own troops. So that's a huge battle. That's a lot of people to lose in one day. He gets to Moscow, which is the capital of Russia, and it's been burned to the ground. There's nothing left. So this great conquering of a city, there's nothing there. And so he sends out these messages for the Tsar to surrender, but the Tsar just ignores him because he knows Napoleon's stuck. There's nothing. How far is Napoleon going to go? Keep going east until what? As long as the Russians keep sort of burning everything that Napoleon shows up to, eventually Napoleon has to turn around. They have no winter gear. It's snowing out, and they have a 3,000-mile trip back to France. Here we have Napoleon on his horse. We have soldiers dead on the ground. Their bodies frozen. Everyone's really cold, as you can see by their posture. Like this guy, all of them kind of huddled together. Okay, there's a couple key things here. 422,000 soldiers depart for Russia. They're going to go in there. All right, 50,000 go down here. We'll see them later. By the time he gets halfway through his march into Russia, this 422,000 has been down to 175,000. That's a lot of people lost. Desertion, that means people running away. People dying from disease, people starving, people getting captured. In the city, Smolensk itself, 30,000 more die there. Here we have that Battle of Borodino we talked about, where he enters with 130,000, and 30,000 of them die. Gets to Moscow, takes it over. It's all in ashes because the Tsar has burned it down. He waits a month. The Tsar basically ignores him and kind of waits him out, and he knows it's time to go back. So on the way back, what do we have? By October 18th, he has 100,000 soldiers left out of the 422,000, so that means a quarter of them have already died. By the time he gets back to Smolensk, he has only 24,000 left, so a quarter of that 100,000 is the only survivors. The wounded are abandoned, so this is so desperate. One of the things in the army, it's like never leave anyone behind. They're in such bad shape here that if you can't keep up with everyone else, you're just left on the side of the road, and you're going to probably die. By the time we get to here, we have 50,000 people left, because now this number went up because of these guys from before that were kind of camped out here the whole time. Anyway, from this 50,000 until they go back across the river that is the border of Russia, we have 10,000 soldiers make it out of Russia. If you do the math, 10,000 divided by 422,000, you will see the rate of survival in the Russian campaign. Super low. Most of them died not from a battle, but from starvation and from disease, and from the cold weather, simply freezing to death. So, again, what this slide says is basically what I just narrated on that other slide. The only thing to add is that now a lot of Europe, after the Spain campaign, the Peninsular War, the Russian campaign, they see Napoleon as very vulnerable, and they're like, this is the time, his army has been decimated, we're going to go after him. And that's exactly what they do, and this is the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. So the Prussians, the Russians, the English, and the Austrians. Right, 3 of those had been quote unquote allies of Napoleon. The English were the only ones that were not. They destroy Napoleon's army. They have a lot more troops than he does. Then they take over Paris. Anyway, Napoleon's generals abandon him at this point. And he surrenders the throne. He gets banished or exiled to the island of Elba, where he was born. Elba is part of Corsica. It's a really small, tiny, tiny island. And guess what? After the French Revolution and all that stuff, we have a new King Louis. This happens to be Louis the 18th, who is Louis the 16th's brother. So, great job, French Revolution. Yeah. After 35 years later, France has a king again, after they had a dictator. Now, again, Napoleon, with his laws in France, most of them were actually pretty good. Much better than the Reign of Terror, those crazy people. But yeah, they have a king again. And Napoleon is banished to the island of Elba, where he has his cool hat and not much else to do. All right, we are going to end there for today.